it's Louise at Spiral Bright Insight, here to talk about the new moon in Gemini. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a galactic and an intuitive astrologer, and I share insight about key astrological events and also try and bring in information about what is happening energetically, weaving in the astrological insight. So this is the new moon video for Gemini, which is taking place on the 27th of May. For us in the UK, it will be the 26th for some of you watching. It's at 4:02 a.m. in the UK, and it is when the sun and the moon join together at 6 degrees 5 minutes of Gemini. Now, if you've heard me talk about new moons before, this will be a repeat. But just to remind you, that with the new moon, this is when the sun and the moon are together. So there is no light of the sun on the moon's surface. We are essentially in the darkness, which is an absolutely perfect energy, an opportunity to seed something. Something is being born or is being seeded at this point that is taking advantage of the darkness, of the void, of the womb space in order to bring forth new life. So this is really potent creator energy. This is about rebirth. This is the perfect time to really start or bring something to life, and perhaps to create something new. And we'll be working with the Gemini energies. Okay, so this is possibly something that we can't yet quite see, but the energies are right. Things are starting to generate, to germinate, and to come to life. So the Gemini energy is mutable air. This is a very playful energy, very light-hearted, very scattered potentially. With Gemini, this is all about communication. Gemini's ruler is Mercury. So we are we are in the mind, it's very mental, very quick, very speedy, very witty, very nimble, very much to do with communication, to the message, to stories, to ideas, to also to mindset and to beliefs and to perhaps programming of the mind. So, it can be very chatty, loves to connect, loves to gossip, very sort of into networking and bringing things and people together. Now, there can be overwhelm when there is strong Gemini in the chart, and there is at this point. I'll show you the chart briefly in a minute. So be mindful that there's likely to be a lot of information, a lot of facts, a lot of noise coming in at this time around this new moon and the days that follow it. So try and stay as centered as possible, because there might be energetic overwhelm, but also information overwhelm. And obviously, if we're too much in our heads, then that can create a problem. So Gemini is also represented by the twins, which is where the kind of playful, youthful, childlike energy comes in, but it is also about the twins, the two. So choices, division, separation, potentially. So there might be more focus on that, or the stories and information that's coming through may be causing a rift. It may be requiring us to take a side, to make a choice. And again, I would try, and if that is coming up, and of course this is energy, we don't always know how it's going to translate often, and I'm being shown time and time again, I talk about the energies and I've got an idea of how that might play out, but then it just completely it goes completely off tangent and off piste, and that's fine. But I'd say we can't really know what to expect at this new moon. There's a lot of shifting energy with the mutable air. Stories are shifting, the sort of mindset, beliefs, messages are shifting. And, that is going to perhaps create quite a lot of instability because of all the moving. The tides are changing and shifting. Timelines keep merging. That's also a very strong theme, which I'll come on to in a second. And although it's very light and we're being encouraged to let go and to kind of release a lot of the density that we might have been carrying around or attached to, be mindful of overwhelm and try and stay as grounded as possible and as centered as possible, because there is a lot going on. A lot has been shaken up. We've talked about Uranus Cazimi last weekend. The full moon, obviously, the last full moon was incredibly deep and profound and powerful. But there is a lot coming up from the depths, and being scattered out at this new moon into the air, all different strands, all different stories. So try and stay as centered as possible. Now, I have been shown more and more of late, and this actually started about a year ago today when I was on a yoga retreat. I was shown Gemini very much in terms of there being strands. And I was kind of seeing it at the time as strands coming down from the universe into the earth and connecting all the light codes, all the information coming in through these strands. I was seeing it as potential DNA activation, so new information coming through that is going to open us up, that is almost like an upgrade. So that may be part of this new moon. But I've also been shown it, as I was talking to a friend earlier today, as strands turned on the side are layers. And this has again been coming up for me a lot in terms of, things are happening at speed, things are changing. It's very difficult to kind of find solid ground, to really know what is the truth, to be able to connect, or I guess buy into something, because the minute you do that, the story changes, the landscape changes, and it's like, oh, okay, I need to think, I need to change my mind, or I need to kind of have a new approach, a new attitude here. And that tends to be, well, that's kind of what's been coming up for me for sure. But if we start to sort of see the Gemini as strands and layers, this opens up a new way of seeing this new moon, because I'm seeing it very much from the perspective of a new story is being written. Gemini is the writer, Gemini is also the voice. So, this is an opportunity with the new moon, the seed, the darkness, and the stillness as well that comes from going into that dark space. We can start to sing a new song, to write a new story, to craft a new line, a new way of being, a new understanding, a new mindset. But we also have the ability to let that work, or allow that to play out on all these different levels. And I was kind of being shown it as, there's a 3D story. So there's a 3D way of looking at something. Then there's a 4D, then there's a 5D, then there's a 6, 7, etc., etc. And it's about having all these timelines almost starting to blend and merge together, to weave together, so that we can start to, I guess, jump in between the different timelines. And that's kind of what I'm feeling and being shown for this Gemini new moon. Everything is starting to weave together, and that makes it quite difficult to discern what is real and which version of reality, is real, is truth. And of course, it's changing all the time. And, something happened to me recently where I was sort of shown, the different sides of looking at it, I guess, and seeing it from a 3D perspective, and how it affected the human version of me and my reality in my day-to-day kind of experience, but also then going into the 4D and seeing the distortion and perhaps, the darker side, because although 4D is more aware, there's also an awareness of the darker side of, any situation, of all the different energies, and then taking it higher to see why the situation came about at all, and what was the learning, and what was the kind of the higher perspective, the sort of the soul perspective, and being able to see things from a much bigger and higher picture. And that has allowed me to access the healing that the situation was designed to trigger and unlock for me, I guess. So I'm seeing this, this new moon as this time when all these different timelines are starting to weave together, to merge, to blend. And, we can pick and choose what we want to believe, which part of the story do we want to take with us. And of course, as Saturn is now at 0 degrees of Aries at this new moon, but it moved over through that final degree of Pisces. And I know a lot of people watched the couple of videos that I shared talking about that energy. And I think what I'm seeing now, and I was aware of it, a lot of us, and most of us have been living through this and experiencing it, but Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces literally dissolved the timelines, dissolved linear time. And that's really beautiful. Well, it's challenging, because when we have to let go of linear time, all point of reference almost disappears. We are completely almost addicted to, I guess, programmed, conditioned to rely on linear time. And as that is all starting to disappear, it's destabilizing, it is disorientating. You just feel that everything's happening at the same time, perhaps, or things are being drawn out and you don't know which way you're coming and going. You don't know what day it is, you don't know what time it is, you don't know what you did yesterday. That is kind of my experience, and I know a lot of people have shared that they've been going through the same thing. It's a little bit wild, and it's not the easiest energy to navigate, but what it is doing is, as linear time dissolves, it means that we are being able to access other timelines. Whereas before they've always been accessible to us because there is only one time, there is only the now. But because we've been sort of, I don't know, trapped in this linear time, this mindset and this understanding, attachment to linear time, we've seen it as things in the past that are locked away. And suddenly we have access to all these stories, all these energies, all this wisdom, this knowledge, these gifts, these challenges, this trauma, the wounds, the blocks, the joy, all of it. We suddenly have access to it. And it's becoming a lot easier to sort of dip in and out of that ancient wisdom. And this to me is about reclaiming old versions of the self and seeing that actually, we are not the kind of the personality, I am not Louise Spiral Bright, insight, mother of two, wife, all of that kind of role. I am all of my soul's history, all my soul's wisdom, all of those memories, and everything is starting to merge and come together. And I'm getting sort of memories and reminders and messages from all these different aspects of me starting to come in together. And that is overwhelming because not only are the gifts and the wisdom and I don't know, the more valuable, I don't know, that's a judgy word, but the better parts of it coming through, but also the trauma and the sorrow and the pain and the loss and all of that is coming in as well. And it's magical, it is beautiful, and it is really challenging. So let me know in the comments if you are experiencing anything similar. It's difficult to kind of describe and put into words in many ways, but this is kind of what I'm seeing is happening. So as linear time dissolves, we can suddenly access all those different timelines, all those different parts of the self, all those different stories. And of course, Gemini new moon is saying, right, we're going to take all those layers, all those strands, all that information, and we're going to write a new story. And with Saturn at 0 degrees of Aries next to Neptune at 1 degrees of Aries, this is a new story, a new spark of light, of life. Something is being born, is being created, but because Neptune is there as well, it is very much spiritual, it is visionary, it is imaginative, it is something that we are building almost from ground zero, from scratch. That can take any form that it wishes to, but it is very much about putting the self at the forefront, into the driving seat, making sure that now we have been able to let go of all that was been holding us back or distorting, manipulating, conditioning, programming us. And obviously, I'd love to say that as of today, all of that disappears. Of course, it's not going to, because there's going to be a lot of residual energy that we have to work through and release and transmute and clear, let go of. A lot of people will still be very attached to it. So, this is not a done deal. It's not something that necessarily happens, overnight. But the new story that we are writing has got the beautiful energies of Saturn and Neptune in Aries sextile the new moon. They are also sextile Mercury, which is at 1 degree of Gemini. I think we'll check the chart in a minute. And something new is being brought to life. So what we'll do is I will show you the chart very briefly. I'm not going to go through all the different aspects. I've tried to do that the last few times. I get a little bit lost. So I'm just going to pull out what I see as relevant. Then we'll talk about the galactic chart, some of the beautiful key energies in that. Again, not all of them because they're extensive, but there's a few that are really, really, really strong and want to be spoken of at this time. And and then I'm going to just bring it right at the end. If you can stay to the end, I've got an exciting announcement to make as well. So working with the Gemini new moon, this is about writing a new story. So if you have got a new project coming to life or that is starting to kind of come through and maybe think, maybe I should think about that. especially if it's to do with writing, speaking, information, sharing, teaching, learning. This is absolutely prime time to work on that. And that is kind of what is related to my announcement at the end. So let's have a look at the chart. I've got the chart. I know it looks really busy. I've got quite a few dwarf planets and asteroids showing as well, but let's just highlight the moon here at 6 degrees 5 minutes of Gemini, next to the sun exactly. Mercury, which is this moon's ruling planet, so Mercury is very strong here, is very close to this new moon at 2 degrees of Gemini, and then we also have Sedna at 1 degree of Gemini. So this is a lot of Gemini. Of course, Jupiter slightly further ahead at 26, starting to make his way now to the final degrees of Gemini. So this is a strong Gemini moon. There is lots of lots of noise, lots of energy, lots of action. And then just a couple of other things I wanted to draw attention to. Obviously, Saturn over here at 0 degrees of Aries. Love that that's 0 degrees 8 minutes. I just always think the 8 is such a powerful number. So the 8 is being magnified by the 0 here. And then we've got Neptune at 1 degrees. We also have Chiron and Eris in exact conjunction here at 25 degrees 28 minutes. That is a really big deal. I will come back and talk a little bit more about that. We have Venus at 20 degrees of Aries is trine Mars. There's a beautiful fire trine there, and of course that's the feminine and the masculine supporting each other, talking to each other, and also egging each other on and sort of, you know, lighting this fire and this flame and this really beautiful action motivated type energy coming through there. And the other thing I want to highlight is over here on the right hand side we have Haumea at 1 degree 30 minutes of Scorpio and Hecate at 1 degree 57 minutes of Scorpio. Now these two together in the very early degrees of Scorpio, both retrograde, so both very much coming within. This is very internal, this is very deep energy, and particularly in Scorpio that's even more so because Scorpio takes us down into the depths, down to explore what is hidden. These two together are creating a quincunx to Saturn and to Neptune. So that is an aspect which creates some discomfort because they are joined together in terms of the numbers and the degree point that they are sharing in their relative signs, in their relevant signs, but there is no point of connection other than the number and the degree point that they're sharing, because Scorpio and Aries don't share the same element, they don't share the same modality, they don't have anything really in common at all. So they're connected, they're having to communicate, they're having to talk, but they are not really on the same page, and that can create a lot of discomfort that can't be avoided. It has to be addressed, but it's something that needs working through. An adjustment is required. And then in the other side, of course, with Sedna and Mercury in Gemini, they are also creating a quincunx to Hecate and Haumea. And as I've said earlier on, the moon and the sun are in a wide sextile to Saturn and Neptune, but Sedna and Mercury are in a tighter sextile to Mercury and Saturn. And when we have two quincunxes, both pointing away at planets which are joined together at the base through a sextile, this creates what we call a yod. So I'm going to just turn the screen off and come back. And let's talk about some of those energies. So if we start with the yod, because, you know, that is a really quite strong, potent, profound aspect to see in the chart. It is not very common, although I do see quite a lot in the client charts that I work on, and I also have a yod in my chart. So a yod is called, it's a fated mystical aspect. It's often called the finger of God. And it's when you have these two energies at the base, which are they're talking to each other, they're working together, but it's not completely flowing. There is kind of a little bit of work and effort is required, and they're both pointing at the same place, which becomes the fulcrum, the kind of the spotlight. And the finger of God, or the yod, is often seen as, well, it's a very mystical aspect. It often is very fated. It's linked to some sort of divine destiny and something that has to happen, that is going to, I don't know, it's important, it's significant. And if you have a yod in your chart, you can often feel as if there's something that's really important that you're here to do, but it's difficult to get access to that information, to understand it. It's like, yeah, but it can't be ignored, because the two quincunxes just create this discomfort, and you've constantly got to try and adjust and change your perspective and maybe look harder. And it's a tricky pattern to have, but it's also very, very powerful. So if we unpack it a little bit, and I'm not an expert with yods by far, but this is just kind of what is coming through to me at this time, so I hope it resonates. So both are pointing at Haumea and Hecate. Haumea being the goddess of rebirth, of fertility. She is all about regeneration. It is said that she, as a goddess, could birth babies from all different parts of her body, which, that's an interesting image or visual to have. But for me, I'd see the symbolism of that is something new is coming. It may be multiple, but it's coming from places that you just did not expect it to come from. So be open to possibility. Things are coming in really fast as well, with this kind of quincunx to Gemini, to Mercury, to Sedna. Haumea is also about shattering paradigms in order that something new can be born and birthed, because often if we get stuck in one way of being, it's hard to bring something new because you're so attached to what you've been doing, what you are doing, whereas Haumea will cut through that so that we can bring in the new. And she's obviously very linked to the earth, to the wisdom of the earth. And in Scorpio, she is also very much sort of pushing for regeneration and transformation by going into the depths, going beneath the surface, exploring the shadow, exploring what lies hidden. But it is deeply, deeply healing, just beautiful energy. And then Hecate is the goddess of magic, of the crossroads. She's very liminal. She represents the three stages of a woman's life, from goddess, fair maiden, to the mother, to the crone. So bringing in that beautiful feminine wisdom through the ages, or gleaned through a whole well-lived lifetime. And Hecate gives us access to that. She also stands with us as we stand at the crossroads, which feels perfect for where we are now. She is here to guide us, to also weave her magical abilities. This is very closely linked to the witch and to witch wisdom, to all that may have been cast aside or discredited or suppressed, literally beaten out of us. And I say us because I know so many people watching this have got lifetimes, as witches and healers and seers, and, that beautiful, all those gifts that they were threats, they were risky, they were dangerous. And therefore, a lot of people tried to, stop us from using those gifts. So again, pointing with Hecate next to Haumea, it's like, we've got this beautiful divine feminine wisdom, but it is hidden. It's in the depths. And these two kind of quincunxes are sort of saying this is the time when we access them. We have to go down. We have to uncover the hidden knowledge. We have to reclaim what may have been hidden, repressed, shut off, abandoned, denied. We have to face the fear, because obviously we've had lifetimes where, things didn't go well, it hurt, we were persecuted. And again, that needs to be cleared, to be transmuted. We have to face the unknown as well, step into the darkness, step into the depths, perhaps bring in, energies, all of those kind of outsiders who have stood on the fringe, who have rebelled, who have not formed, gone along with the status quo, not been conventional, because they had something special, but they have been outcast again. That is bringing all that energy in as well. And it ultimately is about reclaiming power so that we can bring in something new, so that we can regenerate, so that we can birth something completely new. And of course, we've got on one side of the yod, or the bottom part of the yod, which is the base of the yod, kind of trying to hold this energy stable so that it's got a platform, so it's got a foundation, and something to kind of help it bring it into form. We have got Neptune and Saturn and Ceres in Aries. So this is something new that has not been done before, or maybe it has. This is primordial, this is ancient. So we need to bring in this new spark of life in the darkness, in the Aries 0, 1, 3 degrees of Aries, bringing in something new, writing a new story, creating something from scratch that is very much centered in the understanding and the knowledge of who I am. Aries is the self, but it's also the pioneer. It is the hero, the ability, the courage to step foot, to set out on a journey when you don't know where you're going. And with Saturn at 0 degrees, there is nothing formed yet. There is this abyss, this void, this emptiness, this darkness, but it is from that space, which is effectively the womb space, that this new life is forming, is being seeded, is starting to take form. And it's incredibly exciting, so much potential. Neptune here is making sure that it is very spiritual, that there is vision coming in, that there is imagination, that there is compassion. But also with Ceres here as well, she is reminding us of the importance of connecting to the land, of keeping things simple. Ceres is the goddess of the harvest. She carries a lot of grief. She is the wise crone as well, the mother energy, linked to giving and also receiving. But she needs us to remember to keep it simple, to come back to the land, to come back to Mother Nature, to rely on the cycles, on the seasons, and to weave that into whatever it is that we are creating. Of course, on the other side, sextile, is Mercury and Sedna. So Mercury is new information, new facts, new strands, new layers, and again, we talked at the beginning about accessing different timelines. That is really part of this, the ancient and the modern, and possibly even the future as well, weaving it all together. With Sedna, this is accessing information, wisdom, linked to the divine feminine, also linked to the victim, she who was persecuted, who was cut off, who was traumatized, abandoned, rejected, having to literally go through this experience on her own in order to reclaim and access her strength and her power, to come into her true form, the goddess of the seas, of the oceans. It's an amazing story of transformation, of regeneration, and Sedna is reminding of us of that. So there are wounds, there is grief. Ceres carrying grief. This is, and when I talk about the fixed stars, grief, that this is such a profound emotion that we are all tapping into at different levels. Some it might be overwhelming, others might not even notice, but it is coming up because it's such an important emotion that needs to be felt, it needs to be expressed, it needs to be released. And Sedna, taking us into the depths to access information from other lifetimes, from the trauma, and understanding why we had to go through that. Because with Sedna, she was cut off from what she relied on, from her source of security, stability, all that she knew. And, there is this moment where you just think, oh my goodness, how am I going to cope? I can't do it on my own. And there's this fear and this panic and this overwhelm that comes up. But Sedna is here to remind us that often we rely on, or we are attached to something that is actually not serving our greatest good. It's actually holding us back. And it is only by cutting us off from that we are able to access our power. And, the cut off, the rejection, the abandonment is the high trauma, and that is the painful part. That's the sting in the tail. That's the, how do I cope? What do I do now? Where do I go from here? But actually, it is the key. or the push that we need to step into a different version of ourselves. And of course, pointing towards Haumea, regeneration, this is the birth of something new that is completely new. We probably haven't been here before, but we're bringing in this ancient primordial energy, wisdom, support to help us. So that's how I interpret the yod. That went on a little bit longer than I thought, but I hope you resonated with that. It is just coming back to, so I've talked about Sedna and Gemini, and Mercury is part of the yod. Venus in the trine to Mars, obviously divine masculine, divine feminine, working together. They're supporting each other, and there's a real sort of fire, a flame, and excitement and optimism coming through the fire, and things are starting to really move and to heat up and to start, and also to burn away. Huge sort of energy of transmutation. Things are burning to the ground, but they are talking to each other, and it's beautiful because we need the masculine and the feminine to come together and to support each other and to work together if we are going to really make this next jump, this quantum leap. I also want to talk about Eris and Chiron very briefly. They are both in Aries at the same point. Chiron is the wounded healer. So this may be, a wound that we are feeling even more intensely this time. Eris is the goddess of discord and strife and chaos. So there may be something that Eris is trying to really draw our attention to. She will not be silenced. She will not stay quiet. She is going to stand up and speak out for all those who have been persecuted, ostracized, abandoned, set out on the fringe, on the outskirts, not included. And she is wild. And in Aries, oh my goodness, this is fierce. She could be absolutely raging, and Chiron there is going to feel that pain and almost make it deeper, make it more intense. But it's almost like we have to feel that. We have to kind of step into that flame and to go through that pain in order to really understand who we are. And this is ultimately what Chiron and Eris want, is to really understand who we are. In Aries, this is the self. This is reclaiming the self, our personal power that we may have given away. It may have been taken from us, it may have been cut off, it may have been repressed, controlled, manipulated, whatever, distorted. This is about coming back to reclaim the self. And with Saturn at 0 degrees of Aries, that is what Saturn is here to do as well. It's really, really powerful. So there may be stuff coming up that's coming through the new moon, the information, that is going to be painful and is going to be quite noisy as well. But again, it's just everything is kind of playing out as exactly as it's meant to. This is by design. And then Jupiter is in a square to the nodal axis. So, this is Jupiter is expansion, opportunity, growth, and squaring the nodes. Whatever Jupiter is kind of bringing in and understanding and growing through is having a direct impact on our evolution, on our growth, on our collective growth towards Pisces, for the collective letting go of Virgo. So that is, it's pushing, it's creating friction and tension, but again, it's tension that is a catalyst. This is, sometimes we can see challenge and pain and trauma as something that is just too much, and we step into more of the victim side. But this is like, no, we need to release the victim. We need to really step into our power and understand why we had to go through what we did, understand the gifts, understand the lessons and the reasoning for it, so that we can reclaim our power and step into the next version of ourselves. And of course, I also need to bring in the fact that Pluto is in a trine to Mercury, Sedna, and the moon and the sun at this time. Mercury's at 3 degrees of Aquarius. So this is a trine. Pluto is at 3 degrees of Aquarius. So the trine is really active, making sure that whatever we are kind of connecting to at this new moon, whatever we're writing, the new song, the new story, the new mindset, the new perspective, is really helping us to evolve. And Pluto, obviously, the god of the underworld, death, rebirth, destruction, renewal, very much linked to Haumea's energy. Pluto is in a square to Hecate and to Haumea. There is just so much going on in this new moon chart. So let's now talk about the I'll show you the galactic chart next.
The first half of the galactic chart, and I just want to draw attention mainly to this conjunction with the Hyades star cluster, and also, so that's conjunct the sun and the moon. Mercury down here, the ruling planet of this lunation, is conjunct the Pleiades star Alcyon and opposing Alpha Centauri. So I'm going to talk about them. It's also worth looking at the squares with Fomalhaut and Deneb Adige in Cygnus. So the squares there to the sun and the moon. Now, although it doesn't actually show on this chart, Venus is actually very close to and is actually conjunct Tau Ceti. And so we can see there's a trine showing up on this chart with Mars. But yeah, Venus, there should actually be the conjunction here to Tau Ceti as well with Venus, because Tau Ceti is at 18 degrees 9 minutes of Aries, and of course that's possibly just slightly out of the 2-degree orb that this particular software uses, so that's why it is not showing. We can see Jupiter is conjunct Saiph and Betelgeuse in Orion, conjunct Polaris, the North Star, opposing the galactic center, opposing Etemen, so that is pretty powerful. And then just moving down, is there anything else I want to bring in? Possibly not. We've talked about a lot of the other energies in previous videos. Neptune obviously very close to an opposition with the supergalactic center as well. And Saturn in sextile to Mercury is trine Alpha Centauri and sextile the Pleiades.
Okay, so those, I'm going to just bring in a few of those now for, and just explain my kind of interpretation, how I'm seeing them. Obviously, when I work with galactic astrology, I'm being more and more drawn to the archetypes and the stories and the energies of these fixed stars. So that is what I'm going to try and present in this video. So the Hyades is basically the star of this show, and closely followed by the Pleiades and Alpha Centauri. So if we start with the Hyades, these are, I guess, slightly lesser known star cluster. You know, most people have heard of the Pleiades. You know, you can probably look up in the sky and point them out because it's quite, you know, an obvious, I guess, landmark in the sky, in the night sky. But the Hyades slightly less, and the Hyades is part of the Taurus system, but they are at 6 degrees of Gemini, so very, very, very strongly activated at this new moon. The Hyades are said to be the weeping sisters. They mourn the loss of their brother. So there is a really beautiful energy here of sorrow, of grief. Again, you know, that keeps coming through, sort of the weeping, the salt tears, the cleansing, and the ability to express emotion. And I think, again, talking for myself, there has been so much emotion coming out over the past week, and it is really empowering. You know, I think if we can start to get away from the idea that if you're crying, there's something wrong with you, and that, you know, somehow there should be judgment attached to that. Crying is one of the most powerful ways to release emotion, to express emotion. And, you know, particularly if you think about the salt water in the tears and how powerful that is. You know, salt is effectively a crystal. So in many ways, you know, we are accessing the crystalline within us, but we're also shedding density, shedding tension. And, you know, as more and more emotion is expressed and unlocked, we're actually shedding and releasing trauma and grief and emotion from not just this lifetime and not just this week. You know, this is ancient. It goes back so far. And this is really beautiful because the Hades energy is really reminding us of how important it is to be able to connect to your emotion, to express how you're feeling. If you're feeling sad, there is nothing wrong with that. There is no judgment. It is just another emotional state. It's only the human sort of, or society, that has said, oh, it's wrong to cry, or it shows it's a sign of weakness. Absolutely not. It's actually a sign of strength. So the Hades is allowing us to connect to that inner emotion, to express how we feel, to cry those tears. And I think often, when we're crying, we're not just crying for ourselves, we're crying for all the different experiences, all the tears that we couldn't perhaps cry in other timelines. Very cleansing, very lightening. And of course, we've got the lightness of the Gemini. And again, I think this is where the lightness is going to come, because we're able to release so much. So from a more sort of galactic history perspective, the Hades is said to be, I guess, a colony, a civilization that was mainly formed by Lyrans initially, who were displaced. They had to flee their country, and the Vegans as well. They had to move, they had to leave Lyra, and they sort of set out. They went to all sorts of different parts of the galaxy and the universe, but a lot of them came to the Hades and started new colonies there. It's said to be quite a melting pot. There's lots of different sort of beings, different nationalities, different sort of star origins here, but it's also very, very ancient. It's a lot older than the Pleiades star system. So what you've got here, you've got the wisdom, you've got kind of the ancient energy, you've got this kind of emotional intelligence coming through, because what was created in the Hades as a result of the trauma and the displacement from all these other star beings and star nationalities, I guess, was a space where healing could take place, where you could come into a place of peace and harmony and balance, and really try and reframe, reconnect, renew, rebuild. So that is very much coming through. We've got this beautiful energy, this beautiful support from the Hades and the Hadeans and the star beings and their energies, almost like wise masters overseeing, holding space as we move through this time. Now, this star system has already ascended, so many of us with Hades connections have already been through this process, albeit elsewhere, and we've come in to help, to hold space, to share our wisdom, even if we're not doing it consciously. That is one of the gifts and the services that we are here to offer and to provide. And at this new moon, it feels like this is potentially, of course not potentially, it's absolutely definitely going to be activated. So you might not know what it is that you come in to do, but you're doing it just by being here. And it creates and gives guidance for those in turmoil. It helps us to release grief. It's bringing that beautiful divine feminine energy in, helping to heal the divine feminine wound. And also, with the kind of the connection of the sisterhood, the sisters, that solidarity, that networking, that connection, knowing that we're not, although we may feel we're on our own, when things are removed from your world, from your experience, you can feel like you're on your own, but actually the Hades and this new moon is here to remind us that you're not, even when it feels like you are not on your own. And there is that solidarity, and there is that coming together that creates that amazing power. So we've got the Hades. The square to Fomalhaut and Deneb Adige is really interesting, because these are both stars that I would associate with angelic or archangelic frequencies, really high frequency stars. Fomalhaut in particular, one of the royal stars, the Watcher in the south, very much kind of a cosmic pillar, a space holder, a framework, giving us strength, but also bringing in the energy of Archangel Gabriel, the messenger, sort of the angel of the new creation, helping us to call on that archangelic energy to support us and to help us move. With Fomalhaut, there can often be, because it's in Pisces, there can often be this kind of energy of being the victim, and it's really, I guess, trying to guide us away from that, to see whatever is happening, the mourning, the grief, the transformation, the regeneration, as something that is empowering rather than falling into victim consciousness. So that is kind of where the square comes in. Really, really beautiful energy. And Deneb Adige is Cygnus. So again, angelic energy, elemental energy, sort of the fae, fairies, elves, gnomes, all of that beautiful energy coming in again to almost like force its way through. It needs to be a part of whatever we are building, and that's really, really exciting. And also with the swan, just think the gracefulness of the swan, the elegance, the kind of calmness, the serenity, but also that fierce protective energy. You do not want to mess with a swan. They look amazing, but there is quite a lot of fierceness and strength coming through. So again, that is kind of forcing its way in at this time. Now, Mercury's conjunct the Pleiades. The Pleiades is going to be in the spotlight massively this year because of Uranus's ingress into Gemini. Uranus will move over 29 degrees of Taurus, 0 degrees of Gemini, and that is the Pleiades Stargate portal. So we will be talking a lot more about the Pleiades. I know a lot of other galactic astrologers have already, but this is very much kind of our galactic cousins, our galactic parents. This is the energy, again, of sisterhood, but also, I guess, the 5D, that unconditional love, the heart center consciousness, that higher frequency, that higher light, the ability to rise above, to release the density. The only thing I will say with the Pleiades is that historically, their part of their story was to stay too much in the light and to focus on the light. And actually that kind of played out to their disadvantage in the end and their detriment, because they weren't able to look at, or weren't willing to look at, the shadow. So again, there is a bit of a tale and wisdom and kind of, just bear in mind that it isn't all light and that we do need to work with the shadow. And again, that is kind of what the Pleiades are almost here to remind us of as well. And then in opposition to the Pleiades, we've got Alpha Centauri. So Alpha Centauri opposing Sedna, opposing Mercury. Again, this is builder energy, but builder energy that is created very much, or connected very much, to the earth. This is the centaur. This is the ability to bring in kind of maybe hybrid energy, the centaur being half bull, half man. So being able to kind of connect to potentially quite contrasting elements, contrasting states of being, but seeing the strength and force that comes through that. But also Alpha Centauri reminds us of the power of crystals, the power of the land, the power of nature, of building something that has got longevity, that is going to really support us and sustain us as we move through this next part of our history, of our evolution. So it's very grounded spiritual energy, very grounded cosmic energy, very practical cosmic energy, but it's also bringing in the divine masculine intelligence, and the reminder that we need to bring in all the parts in order to create something new, to bring in the intuition and the heart centered in the 5D, that kind of light from the Pleiades, but also the reason, the logic through the head, that where Alpha Centauri comes in a little bit more, the fluidity and the structure, all coming together to build something that is just really, really amazing. And it's such a strong galactic new moon chart, this one. And then I mentioned Tau Ceti. I've talked about Tau Ceti before. Tau Ceti also kind of brings in, again, galactic history, a planet star system that was destroyed, where the people had to leave. But before that, it was really beautiful. Everybody was connected. Everybody, was in tune with one another, with nature. There was beautiful creativity. There was beautiful flow, just gorgeous art, music, stunning nature. And then there's the history of the war, the trauma, the displacement. So again, this is part of our history. This is part of our galactic history, and this is also something that we are working through. We are having to remember it. We are having to process the grief that comes through the remembering, but also learn from it, because a lot of this really, from a higher perspective, is teaching us that actually, we may have sort of seen a home as somewhere, a physical place, a geographical place, a star perhaps, maybe somewhere on earth, that you feel very attached to, but ultimately our home lies within, and that is what Tau Ceti is here to help us remember and to remind us and to teach us. Tau Ceti also, the Cetus constellation, has this beautiful symbolism and connection to the whale, and the whale, the waters, the oceans, the depths, and also the womb space. So I've talked about Tau Ceti and the connection to the womb, and the healing that happened there, that also as a portal for creativity, just stunningly beautiful. And the fact that Venus has just passed over Tau Ceti just before this new moon. She is gaining that beautiful wisdom, that access to that potential, the life force energy through Aries. And the safety that comes from the space holding, the whale. It's really, really powerful, very majestic, and very, very beautiful. So that is playing into this story, as well as are Safe and Betelgeuse in Orion. Safe is the shadow eater, the sword bearer, able to cut through shadow to access the light, to see the light, to see the power. Betelgeuse is also, for me, a star linked to regeneration and the understanding that we are eternal, and that we may change form, things may change, but we're always going to have that core essence, that core truth within us, and we keep regenerating, we keep growing, we keep kind of shifting and changing, and that is part of the cycle, that is part of all that is. Also conjunct, so this is now we're talking about Jupiter, so this is expansion coming through the Orion story and the Orion history, cutting through illusion, cutting through the shadow, remembering that we are eternal, also connecting in the energy of Polaris, the North Star, showing us the way, this beautiful light, this kind of, map in the sky, leading us, guiding us, reminding us. With Polaris, we stand in the middle, we are centered, and we allow everything to revolve and rotate around us. That's kind of the imagery of Polaris. So it's about being centered in the eye of the storm while everything shifts and changes, but knowing that if you stay true to your core, you won't necessarily have to be affected by it or destabilized. This is about being grounded, being centered, being still. And then the opposition to the galactic center is pulling in this energy of the homing signal, Mother Earth, the core of not just Mother Earth, but the center of the galaxy, of all that is, reminding us that we are so much more than what we think, what we've been told. And then the beautiful energy of Eterman in Draco, that's the all-seeing eye, this amazing ability, the dragon energy to walk through shadow and light, to stand in neutrality, but also the protector energy, the transmuter energy, the fire, the flight. Oh, it's just absolutely incredible. So there's lots of other stars that I could go into, but I'm going to leave it there. And just before I go, I want to announce something that I'm really excited about, because I've been wanting to kind of, obviously I share a lot here on this channel, and I do a lot of one-to-one reports. There's lots of information that goes to individuals, but I've been wanting to find ways to share more information about all the sort of the knowledge that I've gained, or my study, or my learnings, over the past years working with galactic astrology. And I am really excited to announce that I have written my first report, which is a paid report. You can purchase it. I will leave the link in the description box below. You can also find it on my website, and I'll share some social media posts as well. This is a report all about Uranus in Gemini, the ingress, the transit, what it means, what are likely to be the key themes. And I've written it from a starseed perspective. So if you're interested in galactic astrology, if you're interested in starseeds, if you're interested in what this is like to look at from a more, a more galactic, cosmic perspective, because obviously there's different layers, different levels to everything, this may be, of interest to you. I talk about some of the key themes. I share what Uranus means, what Gemini means, give the basics, but then take it to different levels. Some of the potential ways, the manifestations, the energies, the themes, what can we expect? And I also weave in the key fixed star alignments, give some information about those. I talk about Uranus through the houses, so you can look at where in your chart, if you know your chart, which house is going to be activated by this transit. We need to see where is Gemini in your chart. And I also give you some quite practical, some grounded tips and suggestions on how to navigate this transit. So it's a 7-year transit. A lot of astrologers are going to be talking about this, but this is a report that I've written. It's long, it's about 12 pages long, so there's a lot of content in there. And I am charging for this one, not a huge amount, having said that, but if you're interested, you can go on, you can just pay for it, download it, keep it, and then just refer back to it as and when you need it. So I'm really excited. I think it's a great way for me to be able to share what I know, and for you to be able to access that and also support my work as well. And hopefully, if it's well received, it will be the first of many. So please check that out. And as always, like and share the video. I'm so grateful. I said in my last video, I feel like we've got this beautiful community forming here. And I love that people are starting to comment on each other's posts as well. And I just think it's so special, it's so precious, and it's so valuable in this time, because we are, to have this tribe, to have these like-minded people kind of coming together. It just, it's very special to me. And I value everybody who shares, or even just a 2-word comment or an emoji. It's just, thank you so much. As always, there is a super thanks button if you wish to express your appreciation that way. And please also join my mailing list on my website, spiralbright.co.uk, because my newsletter will be coming out next week. So thank you so much for supporting me, for being here, for sharing my content. And I wish you an amazing week ahead. Lots of love.